Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Market Pulse series. My name is Rufas Kamau, Markets Analyst at FX Pesa. So today, we are having quite an interesting day after we saw the aftermath of the FOMC press conference, where basically the Fed decided to hold interest rates steady. And later on, which pushes forward to today, we also saw the Bank of England deciding to hold interest rate steady at 4.25%. So, sorry, 5.25%. So as a result of that, we have had quite a good amount of volatility in the markets, which has created plenty of opportunities. And today we are going to look at what happened and try to project on where the markets might be headed next. So before I proceed, I would like to begin with a mic test. So if you can hear me clearly, can you type hi on the live comment section? And these will confirm that everything is working just fine. Awesome. So from this morning's analysis, we went through a couple of trade setups. One of them was Bitcoin. We had understood that this particular asset has been trading in a triangle for the last almost, I would say, 48 hours. And then we had a nice break towards the lower side, where the market basically went straight up to our target of 26,432, which was acting as the previous resistance and now turned into a support level. So immediately after the break, the market made quite a significant move, and this was a nice play. So if you didn't participate in the market, then it's time to learn about this particular setup and know how to respond whenever the market does the same thing again. So these patterns tend to repeat themselves over time. So when you learn how they play out, then you're able to identify these potential market opportunities and take advantage of them whenever they happen. So as for the dollar index, we had the big surprise movement upwards. So even if the Fed decided to hold interest rates steady, there was a consistent talk that the Fed may continue holding interest rates higher, which basically creates a carry trade that ensures that funds are basically drawing into the US away from other markets that have lower interest rates. So after the big spike, we discussed about this morning, basically saying that whenever there's a big spike in price, it's never a good idea to run after that price. So after there is a big spike, let's say for instance, in this movement here, when the market gets to this top, it's never a good idea to make a market entry here. In most cases, you might find yourself making a loss. So the same case happened here. The market made a big spike yesterday, and then the following momentum after that was a price moving higher and then pulling back down during the London session. In the afternoon, getting higher and then back down, and now you can identify that there is a potential kind of a flag happening in this chart. So the dollar index is neither making a progress higher, it's also not moving strongly back downwards. So now we are in this indecision zone where we don't know whether the dollar index will continue weakening or strengthening. So as a trader, your natural instinct is to be patient and then wait for the next available opportunity. So if you look at pound USD, we had a big spike downwards following a strong dollar yesterday. And then today, we had some further downside momentum after the Bank of England decided to hold interest rates level. So as we had projected in the morning, we did some good technical analysis, identifying this as a relatively strong support area. So with the pound basically losing over the last 9 weeks against the dollar, this basically looked like a very interesting area to look for a buy position. But then immediately after the announcement of interest rates decision, we had a big spike with the pound breaking the lower trend line. But then that did not last for long. 3 hours later, the market was right back onto the trend line. And now there's a potential that our original projection will play out. So there's a good likelihood that the pound will continue rallying higher and get back towards the upper trend line, which is around 1.253 price level. So key lessons to learn from that is that whenever there's a big spike in one direction, it's never a good idea to now start looking for position. So if you missed on the initial move, then it doesn't make sense to chase after the price. So focus on your technicals as well as your fundamentals, but immediately after a big spike in price, keep away from the markets. Let that kind of adrenaline just pass out. and then look for a nice technical price action entry. So going forward, we'll be expecting the pound to make a good recovery. So already on the 4-hour chart, we are seeing this happening. So also it's very important to note the outcome of the news, where yes, on one side, we know that the Bank of England, or basically the Monetary Policy Committee, decided to go for that particular rate pause. But then if you look at the details, you'll notice a key difference between the last meeting and the current meeting. So a majority of the MPC meetings have been on a very strong vote, but then this one was pretty much balanced. So from the official bank rate, you can see it was 5.25%. We expected 5.5%, but instead we got 5.25%. And those are 3 central banks that basically decided to hold interest rates level. So from the previous voting, it was 801. Just a moment. Yes, this is 801. Need to confirm that, meaning that 8 members voted to hike interest rates in the previous meeting, and then 1 member had voted to hold interest rates steady. However, this distribution has changed, and the actual outcome that we had in the meeting today was that 4 members had voted to hike interest rates to basically 5.50%, but then the majority, which was 5 members, decided to vote on an interest rate pause. So this basically shows that there is a divided MPC, or the Monetary Policy Committee of the UK. And with this division, you can easily see that the guys who had voted for an interest rate hike, they only needed 1 more person to pass the vote for an interest rate hike. So as we go forward, looking forward to the next meeting, which will be happening in November, there's a good likelihood that one of the members will flip, and then we are going to have a majority going for an interest rate hike. So with that in mind, we know that immediately after the announcement that the Bank of England is not going to hike interest rates, it basically led to a big sell-off in the UK pound. But then looking at the final details of the votes and how they were cast, then there's a very strong and high likelihood that on the next meeting, the Bank of England might go for another rate hike. So as a result of that, then we are already seeing this reversal happening. So even if there was a big sell-off happening in pound USD, there was an immediate reversal, and the market are right back at where they started before the interest rate decision. So this basically means a very strong reversal, a test to push prices lower, which basically failed. And now we are looking at a potential where the pound could now start making gains against the dollar. And of course, the very short-term target is 1.23610. We have 1.24496, and of course 1.25303. So as for USDN, we saw this happening. So the market basically making a big jump higher, and then on the following day, making an impressive comeback, getting all the way back to the lower trend line. And of course, some form of liquidity grab happening here. So if you observe the bottoms for the last couple of days, then you'll understand what's currently happening. So this was the bottom on Monday, bottom on Tuesday, bottom on Wednesday, and then on Thursday, the market breaks towards the lower side and immediately makes a reverse direction movement. So this basically implies that the market was looking for these stop losses that were just set below these areas. And immediately after triggering them, we are already seeing the market attempting to make a reversal. So there is a good likelihood that we will be seeing some much higher prices on the USD JPY currency pair. And of course, it's very important to remember that the Bank of Japan is set to do its meeting tomorrow. So during the Bank of Japan rate decision, we are expecting that the Bank of Japan will maintain interest rates level at the same level they have been holding since the previous meeting. So this is right here, BOJ policy rate, which is negative 0.10%. But then the Bank of Japan press conference later on could cause some increased volatility in Japanese yen pairs. So in this case, if the Bank of Japan maintains its policy, that is printing more money, which is basically described as quantitative easing, and holding interest rates steady at the current level, then we could be seeing some further weakness in the Japanese yen and the dollar continuing to make a recovery against the Japanese yen. So judging from what we are seeing in the dollar index here, yes, the dollar index is taking a step back, but then the potential for the dollar index strengthening seems more likely. So for the pound USD, we have seen that, USDN, we have seen that, and then for the euro, yet another retest of this particular support level. So this is the low that we saw last week, and now this week, the market has tested this low twice. So from this bottom here, the market jumped back higher. Then in the afternoon, it went back to the same support level and jumped back higher, which basically implies that the markets are rejecting lower price levels. And now it's a confirmation that there's a good likelihood that the market will be pushing further upwards, and the immediate target remains 1.06931. So for USD CAD, it was a clean double bottom formation. The market managed to make a break for this pattern. So after losing for a couple of days, I would call this 7-8 days, then we are seeing the market make a strong momentum upwards. But then the gains for since the beginning of the day have already been erased, and there's a good likelihood that we could be seeing the continuation of this momentum, especially considering that oil prices are now very weak. So we have seen oil prices are losing for 2 consecutive days. So today there was an impressive rally, but you can see since the opening of the day, the price is moving back downwards towards around the $92.313 per barrel, indicating that oil prices are not making any new highs this week. So last week or the last couple of weeks, there has been a very strong momentum upwards. But then since the opening of the week this week, we are seeing some further weakness happening in Brent oil prices. So weakness in Brent oil prices also means weakness in Canadian dollar. So as long as the USD remains strong, then we could be seeing some further upside. But then judging from the current price action, it seems like the dollar is taking a step backwards or weakening for a while, which would basically imply that the Canadian dollar would now start strengthening against the dollar. So that explains why we had a very strong gain early in the morning. And now, as we continue with the New York session, we are seeing this continuation further back downwards. So if you look at 1, 2, 3, 4, you'll notice that price opened here for the week, kept going down, following day down, then a reversal on Wednesday. And now on Thursday, we are seeing much lower prices, which basically implies that oil is taking a step backwards. So in this case, now we expect some further downside momentum to be happening in USD CAD prices. And if you look at a higher time frame, for instance, the 4-hour time frame, then you notice the strong bearish candlestick that just formed here, which indicates some further downside momentum. So as for gold, strong momentum upwards in the last couple of weeks. Then this week, we have seen some further continuation higher. But then since the announcement of the interest rate decision yesterday, we saw gold weakening against the dollar. Today, it has continued along that trend, but then it has met our target of 1917, and it seems to be bouncing strongly from that level. So if this level happens to hold as the support for gold, then the idea is to continue trading higher. So there is that potential that we could be seeing gold making an impressive run against the dollar. So for AUD/USD, there seems to be a strong correlation with gold. So even after the big sell-off yesterday and today in the morning, this level seems to be holding on quite well, 0.64028. And now the prices have bounced. And now the immediate target seems to be 0.64615. So there's that potential that we could be seeing the AUD/USD currency pair continue to rally and get back to the 0.64615 price level. So on the other hand, I remember doing some analysis on US equity indices. So they made this major trend line happening as the major resistance line on the 4-hour chart. But then on the 1-hour chart, we have had some good sell-offs for the week. So looking from end of last week and then sideways momentum, and then a big sell-off this week from yesterday evening and today, then there seems to be this likelihood that US equity indices could continue losing. So we have had just a big major spike. So whenever you see this, you don't want to participate in the market immediately. You want to be patient and wait for some form of consolidation. So for instance, we saw the market doing this, basically moving from the upper trend line, making a big impulse movement right here. Then it traded sideways for 2, and then on the third day towards the end, made a breakout. So in this case, if you think the same way, the market just made a big momentum movement, it's not a good idea to look for a market entry. So the better idea is to wait for some form of consolidation. And once that plays out, then you look for potential entry opportunities. So for US 500, it's the same thing, a big sell-off. We go to support, but it's not an area that we're looking to make a market entry. So you just be patient and then wait for the consolidation that might play out around this area. So there's a good likelihood that the market could trade sideways for a while before making the next break. So for Dow Jones, the same thing, a big sell-off. Now the market is holding around this area here. And then potentially you'll be seeing a break from this area. So for the French stock market index, or the France 40, in the morning, we made a wrong projection. And this was after we had this pin bar at this support, which basically created this potential belief that the market could rally higher and change direction after the green candlestick with the long lower tail. But then what we saw after that is the market changing direction and insisting on the bearish momentum. So this is in correlation with what's happening with the US equity indices. And now it seems like there's a strong likelihood that the market may continue moving further back downwards. So right now, looking at the previous lows, which is here and here, then it basically means that there's a good likelihood that we could be seeing a continuation of this trend. So from this bottom to this bottom, and now potentially the market getting to this bottom here. So there is still very strong bearish momentum happening in the French 40 index. So from the 4-hour chart, you can see that there is a sequence of 6 straight and strong candlesticks pushing down lower, which basically implies that there is a strong likelihood that the price could continue pressing back downwards. So for the Euro 50 index, it's the same thing. Market dropping, pulling back, and then continuing further back downwards. So from the 4-hour chart, this is how it looks like. And now if I zoom out and then try to identify a trend line here, then you can see that the bottom is right here. And if you map it this way, then you can see that there is still more room for downside momentum on the Euro 50 index. But then for the UK 100 index, which is an index that made some good rally during the news announcement of UK interest rates, though that rally has already been eliminated, and the price is now basically erasing all the gains that it had made earlier in the day. So if I eliminate all my analysis here, sorry for that, template, just want a plain template, then we can all see that this is a consistent theme. The market found resistance at this area here. Then for the support area, it seems to be somewhere along this area here. So this was the lowest price that we saw yesterday. So now if the market is unable to move higher, then the natural direction is moving further back downwards. And this could retest the low that we saw on Wednesday at 7,635 price level. So moving on to other assets, I already checked out Bitcoin, bounced off here, and it's now moving higher. And of course, we know that if it's moving back upwards, then the breaking point remains a target. So the breaking point is somewhere around, just a moment, I think I'm losing my power. So the breaking point is just around 26,875. So we could be seeing this price bouncing back and getting all the way up to 26,875. So we also had the Swiss National Bank, or the SNB, making an interest rate decision where it chose to hold interest rates at the current level of 1.75%, which led to a very big acceleration of the dollar against the CHF. So on our analysis in the morning, we expected the price to move higher. Yes, it has kept its promise. It's kept going higher. So the only pullback we have seen is in the last 2 hours. I would say not 2 hours, but 8 hours. But then you can see that we are finding support, and there's that potential that the market could continue accelerating higher. So our target is all the way up. So after breaking this area here, which was acting as the resistance right here, around 0.90110, then there's that potential that the market could eventually get to the 0.91450 price level. So for New Zealand USD, this is how it looks like. So also another test of this bottom here, which was acting as support. So if I zoom out, you'll notice the number of times that this area has been acting as support. Also the same level and the same level here. So after testing this area, there was a very strong bounce. And now I expect to see some further continuation upside, where the market could be gunning for another potential high. So now our trend line is lining this way. And if I was to remove this noise here and this noise, then this is what we have as the overall structure in the New Zealand USD currency pair. So potentially the market could be gunning for the previous high. So somewhere around this area could be our new target for anyone who is on the bullish side of this particular asset. So hi, Owen. I can see Ghetto President J scored. Why is pound USD buying? Yet we know we are on the bearish trend. Thank you. I think I've already answered this question. The vote was pretty much balanced. There are 9 members that vote on the MPC policy, and 5 members voted for an interest rate pause, while 4 members were voting on an interest rate hike. So now we know that we need just 1 more member to agree with the 4 for them to go for another interest rate hike. And in that case, especially considering that inflation is still relatively high in the UK and oil prices are rising, then there's a good chance that going into the next meeting, they'll go for a rate hike. So this may explain why we are seeing a much stronger pound compared to earlier on in the day when the pound was losing against the dollar. So hello, Philip. Any views on the Bank of England speech tomorrow? GBP seems to be on free fall because of the rate decision today. Yes, the free fall was immediately after the announcement. It's the initial reaction, but then judging from what we are seeing from the data, basically implies that the pound has better chances of making a recovery. So hello, Kebu FX. Views on pound yen. Yes, I'll be checking on that as we approach the end of the presentation today. So today the presentation is expected to be much shorter than usual. So this pound yen, a big sell-off and immediate recovery. So this is what we are seeing. The market was basically trading along this line here. On the upper side, this is what we are having. So the market basically went for a straight up sell-off despite our expectation of a rate hike, which would have strengthened the pound against other assets. But then after this big sell-off, notice the strength and the size of this candlestick here. So it's a bearish candlestick, a small body and a very long tail, which is probably 3 or 4 times the size of the body, indicating that there is a strong rejection of lower prices. So 3 hours later, the price kept pushing further back downwards. But then in the last 3 hours, we are seeing some form of reversal, and there's a good chance the market will be going back to retest this area. So the area we are looking to retest is the trend line here. So around 182.160. So there's a good chance we'll be seeing the pound going for this, and this would be a nice entry opportunity, targeting even higher prices at 182.179. So I expect the pound to at least make some form of recovery as investors bet that the Bank of England is looking to implement even more rate hikes as the pound recovers against other currencies. So in this case, the yen remains relatively weak. And knowing that tomorrow there will be a Bank of Japan decision, then this is not a very wide speculation. It's actually a high likelihood that if the Bank of Japan holds interest rates at the current level, then the pound could recover against the yen, and we could be getting back into the glory days where the pound has been gaining against the yen. And of course, if you zoom out your chart, you'll notice that the overall trend has been upwards. So this is a flag that has been playing out. And now that we have grabbed the liquidity from the lower side, there is a good chance we'll be seeing some even higher prices. So that's not just the potential target. We could also be seeing some further upside happening from this trend line all the way up towards the upper trend line. All right, guys, I think we have had the better part of the week. We don't have much coming up in the economic calendar. So I'll be trying to check to see if there's anything major to observe. So tomorrow, there is quite a data point that will be resuming, and this is the S&P Global Manufacturing, as well as a Flash Services PMI. So this is bound to have some volatility in the markets. So right from the morning, we'll be getting the Flash Manufacturing PMI, as well as Services PMI from Australia. Then later on, we look at the same data for Japan. And then we also be getting the Bank of Japan monetary policy statement, Bank of Japan policy rate, before we look at UK retail sales. Then later on, we get the Bank of Japan press conference before we get to 10:15 a.m., where we now focus on European flash manufacturing and services PMI. This will be released at 10:30 a.m. Then we look at the same data for the entire Eurozone. Remember, this is Germany at 10:30. 11 a.m., we look at the entire Eurozone. Then we look at the same data for the UK, and of course, the same data for the US. So we also be getting a speech from FOMC member Cook. And of course, for Canada, we'll be getting core retail sales as well as official retail sales for Canada. So the key data points to watch for tomorrow is one, the Bank of Japan interest rate decision, as well as the press conference. This will be early in the morning. Then once we are through with Japan, we look at retail sales for UK at 9 a.m. That will be the second most important data point in the market. Then the Eurozone manufacturing and services PMI will be key indicators of the health of the European economy. Then the UK flash manufacturing and services PMI before we look at Canadian retail sales and US flash manufacturing PMI and flash services PMI. So for USD traders, the key focus will be on the S&P Global Manufacturing and Services PMI. If you are a GBP trader, then there will be a lot of news for you, since you'll be getting retail sales data in the morning, and then in the afternoon, we get the flash manufacturing as well as a services PMI. If you're a Canadian dollar trader, then your time is 3:30 p.m. And of course, if you are a Japanese yen trader, it should be somewhere between 8 and 9 a.m. After 9 a.m., this is when we'll be getting the Bank of Japan press conference. But then early in the morning, around 7:30 to 8 a.m., this is when we'll be getting the monetary policy statement, as well as a Bank of Japan policy rate. So that's it for the day. Thank you very much, guys, and I hope to see you on the next session. So remember to watch the latest episode of the Bullish Banter podcast. It's out on all platforms. You can watch it right here on YouTube. You can also watch it on Spotify, Google, as well as Apple Podcasts. And of course, tomorrow we'll be having another market snapshot session presented by Samson Mzera. And these will happen at the usual time, 11 a.m. So make sure to join and enjoy your trading day. So last question I'm seeing here is USD JPY. I think I've answered that question several times. So for USDN, fundamentally, this is poised to move further upwards. So right now, what we are seeing here is the market breaking towards the lower side, retesting the area and moving further back downwards. But then, as I mentioned earlier in the morning, and of course, today in this session, whenever there's a big jump in price, it's never a good idea to look at an entry point at that exact moment. So having patience will be very crucial in such moments, just waiting for the market to play out and present you with another trading opportunity. So while there was a big jump downwards and the market got to this bottom, pull back to this area and is now moving further back downwards, I'm not very confident that the market will continue moving further downwards. And of course, we know that according to our stop loss rules, if you're going for a short selling position, it's much safer to set your stop loss all the way up to this point. But then since there was a big price spike, it doesn't make sense to take such a big risk, since you don't expect the market to continue with such a move or a similar move. You expect a much smaller move. So whenever there's a big spike in price, you know that the next proceeding move will not be as massive as the previous one. And I'll try to illustrate this. Let's see if you can find another area where the market made a big spike. Yes, something like this. The market makes a big spike downwards, but then moves up and down, but this doesn't lead to any significant spike. So we also have this exemption where the market makes a big spike and then continues in that direction with an even bigger spike. So in most cases, you will find that whenever there's a big spike, the following momentum is not as much as the previous one. So in that case, it's easier to stay outside the market and then wait for some form of consolidation before you make a market decision. So for instance, you can see the big sell-off here. Let's say there was some news at this area here. Then after the news, the market trades sideways for a while before making a break towards the upper side, which presents a nice trading opportunity. So you don't want to be chasing after the price, especially immediately after news announcements. So for now, technically, it seems very bearish that the dollar is losing to the yen, but then I cannot discount the dollar. The dollar has been pretty strong for the last 8 weeks, and this is not changing, especially after getting a very hawkish Fed. So in this case, I would be looking for bullish positions rather than the price action that is telling me to go for a short selling position. So in this case, I'll be patient until I see a signal or evidence of the buyers coming back in the market and driving the prices higher. All right, guys, thank you very much, and I hope to see you on the next one.